And with that, let's take some questions.
All right, we've got plenty of them. So again, I'll put a link where you can go to PollEV in just a moment. And a reminder, you can also upvote others if you've already asked your questions. So let's jump right in here, Danny. And what I'll actually do is go directly to the source. And that way we'll be able to see these here. But the most popular question is one that you can see here at the very top.
Yeah, I'll get going. How does the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act fit into the Biden plan? Well, that's the whole point of tonight. It's not clear. It very well could fit into the Biden plan, and that's what this lobby day is about. We want to make sure that it fits perfectly into the Biden plan. Biden is going to be talking about a package, a lot of different bills. It could include a carbon price like the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act, and all of our primary asks are geared towards making the case that this is in fact the best fit for the Biden plan. Very curious to know if President Biden is aware of CCL legislation and if he is supportive. We've heard that champs for our bill have been making the case for carbon pricing every time they're talking to Biden cabinet officials, and so I'm pretty sure that President Biden is aware. Any idea when we might see a reintroduction of the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act? I think it will be soon. The Deutsche office, the reason to introduce early is so that you can get a lot of people looking at your preferred solution and that you have the best chance of getting it included. Deutsche knows that, and so he does want to introduce early. I think it could be soon. Possible it could be before our lobby day. I think that's unlikely, but I think that we would see a reintroduction in the House fairly soon. I think a reintroduction in the Senate, if it happens, would be further off.
And Danny, just to clarify that, because it's down here a little bit lower, have you heard from Representative Deutsch if he's committed to a bipartisan introduction, or will he introduce even if there is no Republican co-sponsor?
All we've gotten out of him is that he would prefer to have it be a bipartisan introduction. I don't think he's make or break committed to a bipartisan introduction. And of course, his bill, it's not something that we can control the way of that introduction. Given Mitt Romney's recent comments in support of a carbon price and dividend and Lisa Murkowski's favorable comments in the past, what are we doing to get one or both of them to co-sponsor the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act with Senator Coons? And are we optimistic that we will? I would say that we are hopeful, and I will say that our folks in Utah and our folks in Alaska are some of our best CCL volunteers. They have a really robust network. They have really robust relationships with their members of Congress. And so, kudos to our folks in Alaska and Utah. Yeah, that's all I have to say about that. What is CCL's position on the Clean Future Act? The Clean Future Act is one of those bills that I mentioned. We're going to see a lot of different policies coming out. The Clean Future Act, I think, represents what I would characterize as the energy and commerce perspective on climate. Democrats want to have their stamp on climate, but energy and commerce can't introduce a carbon tax or a carbon fee. They can do a clean energy standard. They can do a lot of other things. And so I think that the Clean Future Act is the energy and commerce perspective on what to do. It's a reintroduction of a bill with the same name that was introduced in the last Congress. And, there's a lot of good stuff in there. It doesn't have the same kind of history of bipartisan support that the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act. You don't have the same kind of business support coming forward right now in support of the Clean Future Act. But I think that it certainly could be a part of the discussion, and we'll just have to find out. How do you see the Durbin Carbon Fee and Dividend 75% return and 25% Vista bill in the context of CCL and the Biden climate plan? Well, the Durbin Carbon Fee and Dividend bill is one of the bills we're asking. That's part of the Senate Democrat ask. So we are asking Democrats to look at the Durbin bill, look at the White House Schatz bill, look at the Coons-Feinstein bill, pick their favorite, pick one or pick all of them, and sign on as a co-sponsor. We want to make, and this is responding to our first imperative of making sure that a carbon price is a part of the discussion, whether it's through regular order or through its reconciliation. Getting more Democratic senators on board, I think, makes it more likely that a carbon price is included. And you know, with the Durbin bill, I mean, it's going to get a huge amount of emissions reductions. It's going to clearly clear our second bottom line of making sure the bottom 40% of earners in this country end up ahead. So I think it's a strong bill. I still prefer Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act, but it's a very strong bill, and we are asking Democratic senators to co-sponsor this bill as well as those others. Any thoughts on the news that the American Petroleum Institute is considering endorsing a carbon tax? I would say a carbon price. Is it greenwashing because they're sure it won't pass? I think it's fantastic that the American Petroleum Institute is taking this step. They're both Democrats and Republicans who have connections with companies represented by the American Petroleum Institute. And I think that that they are seeming to finally align their position with what scientists and economists have been saying is the fastest, most effective way to address this problem for a very long time, more than a decade. I say it's about time. I don't think it's greenwashing because they have to recognize that just by putting their name in support of this, a lot of people are going to take that at face value. This is going to provide support for Democrats and Republicans to support this kind of policy. And if you know that your statement, your words are going to provide that kind of support, that's not greenwashing. That is a real tangible shift in what is politically possible. So no, I don't think that's greenwashing. I think this is very exciting. Pallone's bill has a clean energy standard but no carbon price. What's keeping him from going there? Pallone runs the Energy and Commerce Committee, and the Energy and Commerce Committee, they can't do a carbon fee or tax. The only carbon price they can do is wax and mark, is a cap and trade. That's what wax and marking was. That went through the Energy and Commerce Committee. So the answer here is that he is the chair of the Energy and Commerce Committee, and that's what he can do given the jurisdiction of the committee that he chairs. It's that simple. How can we be successful with only 3 Republican senators? Don't we need 10 in order to overcome the filibuster? We can be successful with 3 Republican senators in guaranteeing that a carbon price is part of the discussion regardless. I think based on the level of interaction between Democrats and Republicans, particularly in the House, which is not that much, I think that if I were a betting man, I would say that reconciliation is more likely. And so the goal here, by getting those 3 Republican senators, if we end up in a reconciliation standpoint, as I said, the carbon pricing part of that reconciliation, the reconciliation bill is going to be a whole bunch of stuff. It's going to be the budget, because it's budget reconciliation. It's going to be infrastructure. It's going to be EJ. It's going to be a whole bunch of other things. But if we get Republican support for the carbon pricing component of it, then that's going to be less controversial. And when Republicans inevitably attack the reconciliation bill as a whole, they're less likely to attack the carbon pricing parts, the climate parts. And so that is actually a big win. Yes, we do need 10 to overcome the filibuster in regular order. I also think that getting at least 3 makes it more likely that we get that's co-sponsors. You don't need to be a co-sponsor to vote for cloture. That's the vote to overcome the filibuster. And Republican senators can decide to split their vote. They can vote for cloture to overcome the filibuster, but vote against the policy if they want to. So those 3 senators, there's all sorts of ways that is still strategic for our efforts. 1, to make sure a carbon price is at the center of the climate discussion. 2, to make sure that whatever passes, if it includes the carbon price, has long-lasting, durable, bipartisan support. What about talking about the EU border adjustment? I'd plan to lead with that with my House rep. I think that talking about the EU border adjustment is great. I think that the EU border adjustment, the EU has a carbon price. It's had a carbon price for a long time. They committed to enforcing a border carbon adjustment on that, and they set a date, January 1st of 2023. That means that this Congress is the only Congress that has a chance of ensuring that American businesses are competitive, have price equity in the EU market. And remember, the EU market is the largest foreign market available to American companies. So I think that's a great one. And I would say this may be part of why you're seeing so many businesses support carbon pricing in such a big way, is because those big businesses, especially those trade associations, those chambers, Business Roundtable, American Petroleum Institute, they have to sell in Europe anyway. They're already subject to a carbon price. And so it's easier for them if the United States is matching the ambition of, again, the largest foreign market outside available to U.S. companies. So I think that's a great idea. How do we get progressives who care more about environmental justice, especially considering that many of those groups are against market-based solutions like carbon pricing? I think that what is important for environmental justice is to make sure that they're a part of the conversation as early as possible. This is something that we have done. We have introduced the Deutsche Office to environmental justice groups that we have been in touch with. I am quite certain that the Biden administration is going to be doing the same. I'm quite certain that he's already doing that. Environmental justice groups already have the clearest thing that they have requested, which is a seat at the table when decisions are being made. I just don't see Biden taking that chair away. I don't see it. I don't see that that's possible. Some of them are against market-based solutions, but not all of them. And I think that while you are seeing some of that, you're seeing some climate or environmental groups also be against this. Part of that is rooted in a sense of anti-capitalist sentiment, and there just aren't very many anti-capitalists in Congress. So I think that as you get into discussions, as for that subset of groups who do oppose market-based policies as a general rule, I think that Democrats, the ones who hold the vote cards, they're not going to be able to support it for those reasons. They're going to have other reasons to support it. So I think that EJ already has a seat at the table. We have invited environmental justice groups and put them in touch with our closest seat to the table with the Deutsche Office. And I think that they're going to be the part of the discussion moving forward. I think that Biden is already ensuring that that's going to happen. Imagine the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act is introduced in the House and Senate through a reconciliation process. Would we support passage if only Dems supported? It depends on the context. It depends on the context. It depends on the context. We'd have to see what else was in there, but I will say that if the Energy Innovation Carbon Dividend Act in its entirety were included in a reconciliation process, I think it would be extremely difficult for us to turn away from that. That's the one thing we've been for so clearly for so long, and so I think that it would be very hard for us to say no to that. It's discouraging to hear the House Dems say there's no appetite for a carbon tax when introducing the Clean Energy Futures Act the other day. What to make of that? I think that it's up to us to show them they're wrong. CCL is an organization that has 200,000 supporters. We had over 500 people on this call just tonight. And if you look at that carbon pricing is popular document, that is the anti-argument. That is the best argument against this. I think that they, at the same time, as you may be hearing this, you're also hearing House Democrats on the Energy and Commerce Committee saying they may prefer a carbon price to a clean energy standard, even though they have their jurisdiction. And you have them saying a clean energy standard, which is a key part of that Clean Future Act, is not reconcilable. And so even though a lot of Democrats aren't thinking about a reconciliation process, the Democrats on the committee that would have primary jurisdiction for that clean energy standard believe it can't be reconciled. It's in the category of that $15 minimum wage, which the Senate parliamentarian said, nope, can't reconcile it. So this may represent the most recent quote from Energy and Commerce Democrats, but it's not the only quote. Some of those other quotes are more encouraging, and it's on us as advocates to make them aware of all the support that a carbon tax already has. What are CCL's official thoughts in terms of the possibility of some of the revenue from EICDA being used for other things other than dividends, as long as the poor people in our country are protected? We have always envisioned a sausage-making process. We've been for what we've been for, and we've done extremely well in having that message discipline. That has been very strategic. I think it's served us very well. But I've also been saying for some time now that our two bottom lines are whatever policy passes has to take a big chunk out of emissions and has to take care of those bottom 40% of people. You don't have to use 100% of the revenue to take care of the bottom 40%. And so we are excited that the sausage making process is coming forward. And if using some of the revenue is the easiest way to make sausage. And so I think CCL, we're looking forward to a bill becoming a reality that has to go through the sausage making process. And in that process, we will use those two bottom lines, got to take a big chunk out of emissions and got to be good for this bottom 40% to evaluate what comes out the other end of that sausage making process.
It's time for Danny to go full wildcat mode, your favorite time of the night. We've only got 4 minutes left here, Danny, and we've got a lot of popular questions. I wish you luck in fielding as many as you can.
All right. When will I be on the podcast, How to Save the Planet to Pitch Carbon Fee and Dividend? As soon as enough of you tell the people who run that podcast to do it. Is CCL having any activity with the Problem Solvers Caucus? Yes, a lot of our volunteers have been making Problem Solver Caucus asks for quite some time, and I think that there is some more movement on that maybe. So Problem Solvers Caucus remains an interest of a lot of CCL volunteers. Imagine EICDA is introduced in the House and Senate reconciliation problem. Oh, already answered that. Does the Climate Solutions Caucus, particularly in the Senate, have any role? Any reason to mention them in our meetings? Yes, the Climate Solutions Caucus could have a role. They are studiously avoiding being pegged as the Climate Solutions, as the Carbon Tax Caucus. But I think that if you're going to look for Republican support for a carbon fee or carbon tax, the Climate Solutions Caucus is the place to start, and that remains the most active place for discussion, bipartisan discussion on the topic of climate. Our Congresswoman is really interested in transportation. We are also talking to the transit equity and unions. Can you talk about what the effects of carbon fee and dividend would have on the transportation industry? Well, this is the key about it being economy-wide. So some advocates have been pointing out that a carbon price doesn't do so well for transportation, which is true. That has to do with the relative price of gas that we're all used to paying and how much the carbon price would raise it. But then they suggest something like a clean energy standard, which would have no impact on transportation. So transportation would provide an incentive for everybody in the country using fossil fuels to reduce their fossil fuel use, unlike most climate policies. What will Senator Manchin support for climate legislation? Only Senator Manchin can answer that, but we also have great people in West Virginia with a great relationship with the senator, and they're working on it. How do you see the CLC and Republican climate advocates in the context of CCL and the Biden climate plan? I think that I'll say Republican climate advocates in general, we continue to work closely with them. They can speak about the climate to Republicans in a way we just can't. But we try and coordinate where we have strengths. I think that they could be really important in getting to those 3 senators in the Senate or those 10 Republicans in the House. Can you clarify enforces accountability? What I mean by that is if you haven't reduced your emissions, you're going to pay for it. There's going to be a dollar amount that you're going to pay, And from that point on, you're going to pay more the next year and more the next year and more the next year. Those billions of dollars across the economy for polluting are what I call accountability. Is $15 per ton sufficient to make a difference? Yes, there was a recent paper by Noah Kaufman published in Nature Climate Science, Climate Change, and he did a net zero, near term to net zero. And he modeled what is the near-term carbon price to get to a zero carbon future by 2050, and smack bang in the middle of his targets and his co-authors' targets for 2050 net zero was the rate of increase for the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act. So I feel very good about that peer-reviewed result.
All right, Danny, you get your favorite choice. The final question, you can pick from any order here, but I do want to be mindful of your time. We're at the top of the hour, so we'll give you one last one.
Is ratifying the Kigali Amendment or phasing out refrigerant greenhouse gases a supporting ask for the Senate? It seems like a pretty good ask since it already has bipartisan support and would be a clear one on the climate. No, this is not a good supporting ask, because this is part of what made the December COVID relief package such a big deal. You remember that there were a number of climate policies that were passed in those. We worked on some of those, the BEST Act, the Use It Act, the Climate Safe, Climate Ready Fisheries Act. Also included was a bill that gets the United States to past Kigali anyway. Whether or not we sign Kigali, companies are already on the hook. So if you're asking senators to sign something that they've already passed and is going to achieve it anyway, that very much risks them perceiving you as wasting their time, and you're pushing for something which has already been accomplished. So HFC is extremely important, but we have a recent win, and so I think you can make a lot more progress with in other areas.